In this Listen to Learn discussion, I'm chatting with repeat guest and business consultant Lauren Hisey. Lauren, say hello.
Hi.
Listeners can check out my 2020 conversation with Lauren on episode 28 of the Share Life podcast. In this conversation, we're talking about her mission to have 100 lunches with 100 people and the lessons she learned along the way. She started in 2020, around when we first chatted, and I think I was one of the earlier lunches. And so she has now finished these 100 lunches 2 years later this summer. So in 2019, Lauren, who is a continuous improvement specialist, transitioned from corporate America, working with Nielson and AT&T before that, to the entrepreneurial life as an independent coach and consultant. She works with business owners to rapidly get from where they are to where they want to be. And we originally connected through the organization she's involved with called Kettering Executive Network. And I had actually spoken at one of their events about Path of the Freelancer and how to flourish as a freelancer during the pandemic. Well, now she's finished her 100 lunches, and I wanted her to share the lessons she learned in the process. Her project is a similar one to what I did when I jumped into freelance, and my recommended go-to approach for anyone jumping into entrepreneurship. So, Lauren, go ahead and start by telling us about this mission, when it started, when you finished, and why you began it to begin with.
So how this started, this was back in 2020 when we couldn't go anywhere. The whole world kind of shut down.
And you're
Uh,
you're a new entrepreneur.
yeah, as a new entrepreneur, I launched in 2019, and then a year later, it's kind of like everything just kind of stopped because nobody was spending money. But I wasn't going to let that. I call it a small defeat now, right? The
Yeah.
fact that it felt huge. Um, and so I figured and I had participated in someone else's 100 lunches, and
Mhm.
I had met her through another network I belong to called Women in Lean, and she's over in I think she's in the UK. And I forget what number I was of hers, but I loved the concept. And then I was thinking one day I was like, I was talking to my friend of mine from Australia, and I said, you know what? Even though we can't see each other, we were doing a lot of FaceTiming, and
Mm,
because it just was, just because you can't see someone in person doesn't mean you can't see them, like this and this.
yeah.
I think we all discovered that we can all do that. So after I was part of someone's lunches and talked to my friend in Australia, I was like, you know what? I told my husband, like, I know we can't go out to network, but that doesn't mean I can stop networking. And so I asked one person to be part of my lunches, and then I started on my journey down that. I did a lot. So most of my lunches were all virtual until about 2021. I think I'm trying to think, maybe springtime of 2021 or maybe in the summer of 2021. Because I remember my first lunch was with a gentleman from Kettering, and
Yeah.
his name was Carl. And he said, "Would you be open to having lunch?" That was the first. I think the second or third time I was asked if I was okay and open to meeting lunch. I said, "Yeah, sure, let's get done." I had my vaccines, and we're supposed to be starting to get back out in the world. So since 2021, my lunches have been both virtual, and have been both virtual and in person. Um, and I've met so much amazing people. I've met the furthest away was two people from Australia, and then yeah, two people from Australia, and then I think I've had a bunch of people from over in Europe as well, and then but most majority have been here in the US, probably because it's easier to do it based on the time differences. And a lot of them lately have been in the Atlanta area just because of Kettering.
Yeah.
I think it's great. I've been trying to do a lot more networking locally as well because I was trying to get into more local businesses, but that doesn't stop me from, meeting people from all over. But the lessons I've learned, I think I've had a few people ask me if I'm gonna write a book, and I'm like, oh, that's a lot, right? I guess I could just compile all my lunch posts into a book. But I've learned so many different things about different people, and I do these without any agenda, it's more of me learning about other people and figuring out how I can help them, right? Doing something, pay it forward.
Mm, yeah.
And it's interesting to me. Like I've met people that I've known for probably maybe even a few years, didn't know. enough about them to know who they really were. And once you start having lunch with them, you connect with them on a different level versus of instead of it just being purely business, you get to meet them on a more personal level. And I think that's how you develop great relationships. In fact, being an entrepreneur, people always ask me, "Well, how do you sell?" And I'm like, I think that was one of the biggest things I got out of this is learning how to talk to people and have more of a relationship business with people as well with a lot of my
Mm,
clients. Instead of thinking my clients as just a client, it's more how can I help them, and that's I think the relationship business comes into that when you work with your clients for a lengthy amount of time.
yeah. So would you say that was a change in yourself, in terms of like the relational focus?
Yeah, it was. It was a change, and it got me over being scared too, right? So it's more of is always putting yourself out there. I know, like we were just talking about, podcast and building things that way, and it's just I think I got over the hump of asking people to be part of my lunches, and then it's also made it a lot easier for me to talk to people, in
Mm.
it, just in general.
So did people, the fact that you were going into these meetings agenda free, I imagine some people appreciated it, but did some people kind of almost question it, like, you have an agenda, you're just not telling me, or like how did that kind of play out?
I think I've had a couple of people where, especially if we were just doing it over Zoom or a little, if you didn't understand the concept at first, I said, no, there's no agenda. And they were, they would ask me up until like an hour, what's the agenda? I'm like, there is nothing to prepare for. It's just about meeting people and
Yeah,
networking and figuring out how can I help you? It's not,
yeah,
it's, I think sometimes when people network, they get the wrong thing about networking, trying to figure out, oh, she's just trying, it's just for her, but it's not. It's more about them than it is me.
yeah. And that's interesting because when I was doing my meetings, I remember one person, he's like, so you just want to get together to get to know each other? That's it. Like, and he had a hard time comprehending it. And so I don't know, maybe is that the nature of, we're just in such a transactional world that to be agenda free is almost an anomaly.
I think it is, especially in I want to see I was going to see more in the US and maybe and actually I want to expand that to be more in North America as well, right? So I'm
Hmm.
going to include all of North America into that because I think here we're such a like you said, we're very transactional. And so sometimes people, especially depending on what part of the country you're from, or if you're from even up in Canada, like depending on where you're from, I think people are always like, well, what's the point? What are they trying to get out of this? And it's but when you talk to when I talked to the people in Australia, well, those two were actually a little bit different because they already knew about the 100 lunches thing.
Mm,
They've been embarking on their own journeys, but then people over in Europe were very they understood that there was no agenda. I think most of the folks out of Kettering are a little bit different because in Kettering we're not. It's always how can I help you, and it's a very pay it forward organization.
mm,
So that's I think a little bit different concept too. Like I
mm.
said, but it really depends on what part of the US people are from too.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's while people are like, oh, we're all yes, we're all the same country, but what I've always told people that have first come into the US, I said we're all different. Like we're all the same, but we're all different. Like
Yeah.
each area has its own difference. And where someone says, "Oh, the Florida's the South," I'm like, "No, Florida's." So I'm originally from Florida. I'm going to tell you, Florida's not the South. Florida's a melting pot. And then, but I live now that I live in Georgia, like North Georgia, that's like the South. Like people are like the South. What they say that most people will welcome you into their arms, and they say y'all all the time. That is truly the thing. But then when you go, say if you go to out west, that's a whole different culture too. That's just I mean I would say they're probably a lot more relaxed than some of us over here. So
Yeah. So, I mean, how did the pandemic play into this, particularly the first year? I mean, it's that's in the middle of it. I mean, obviously that helps in terms of doing virtual meetings. People are more open to it. Um, did you what are your thoughts on, and just in terms of that season? and as it related to your 100 lunches?
Okay. Yeah. So I started it because I knew that there was a way for us to network without having to meet people.
Mhm.
And so I think all of us were, I think all of it, I think I wasn't the only one that felt like, oh, like isolated, right? So I was like, all
Yeah.
right, you can't just be isolated. So I started to take that as, I took 2020 as a year to grow. And so that was one of the ways that I grew was getting out there and just putting myself out there, getting to meet people and yeah, it's just getting to meet people because there's no reason why we couldn't talk to
Yeah.
people, like you said.
And
In fact,
how much of a stretch or outside of your bubble or comfort zone was that for you?
the first 20 was a stretch because I was reaching out to people who I've never really talked to before. And
Yeah.
so, and I was very adamant at first when I started this, it was with people who I didn't really know
Yeah.
very well. And then I've had some people along the way who I have known for a while, but it was a way to I hadn't talked to them in years and we reconnect. I had them as part of my lunches to reconnect.
Mm.
So, it was great. It was great on both ways because people got to know more about me, but that got to know about them. And by doing a lot of those connections, I've I met with some CEOs, and I'm like, and the you know, and the advice they gave me was absolutely amazing. I learned so much from them. I learned from and there's I think I had some CFOs, some CIOs. I've had small business owners. I've had peers.
Yeah.
I had an old one of my old bosses from AT&T. I had an old friend. So yeah, it or just people that I knew at Nielson who I haven't really ever connected, who I knew but didn't really connect with. And
Yeah.
so I learned so much about people that way, and I got to learn about how to ask questions. But I also the biggest thing was learning to listen without reacting. I think that's one of the biggest things. It's still very hard for me to do, but learning to listen without reacting was one big thing that I learned as well.
Yeah. Listening. I guess dive into that a little bit more.
Okay.
Listening without reacting.
Yeah, so as a continue, so I was used to be really good. I'm good about that when I do my consultant work, right? So I'm
Mm.
very good about just listening without really responding. But then I realized when I first started networking and when I first started I even in my personal life, like, when you're just talking with my husband, like, I always have to, like, feel like I have to react to what people are saying, and I'm like, "You know what? There's no reason why to do that," and I always felt a little stressed out about it, and now I'm like,
Mm.
Let's just go with it with this more casual." So what's the saying? Like, you were given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right?
Yeah. So the idea of listening to learn versus
Yeah.
listening to answer, listening to win the conversation or whatever it might be, right?
Right, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And and I was gonna say, and that's helped a lot to me with too when it comes to even just talking with prospective clients and my clients themselves when you're first going in and having the conversations is I always ask them, what's your problem? Like, what's your business problem or what's keeping you up at night? And that gives me, I have also learned to, and this tells me I don't need to have an answer right away
Mm.
unless they ask. It's just more about me learning.
So what do you think that is? Like, why are you compelled to want to give them that when what you're saying is I don't need to give them that? What is it that's going on in you that's making you want to do that?
Probably because I just like to help people. I think
Mm.
that's probably the biggest thing. I mean, that's why I love what I do. I love helping people. And I think, each one of us are as consultants and freelancers or whatever that we do, we each have our own thing that we try to help solve. And at the end of the day, I think we all, at least me, I just want to help someone. And the only way for me to do that is to truly understand what the problem is. So
Yeah.
I have to listen first before I can help them solve their problems.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you mentioned like meeting people all around the world. So this is kind of an interesting shift from local networking to sort of virtual networking, where all of a sudden you're meeting people around the United States and different parts, different countries. So what would you kind of highlight about that dynamic that was refreshing or restricting or something else?
I think the biggest refreshing was just learning about different people and living and learning about the different parts of the world, actually. it's interesting to learn how we are all the same, but also uh, we're similar, but we're not at the same time. And learning about the different cultures from people are from. I mean, there's even people here in the U.S. that are originally from other parts of the world that I've met. And it was interesting to learn how they grew up, what they did, and while some of the stuff that we would do as children would be similar, it was also vastly different too. So it's kind I think that was the interesting thing was learning about the different cultures, learning about people themselves, learning about where they live. And it's kind of put a lot more on my travel list that I want to
Yeah.
go to now.
All the places you want to visit that maybe you hadn't even considered visiting.
Exactly, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, you're doing 100 lunches over 2 years. Was it, I can kind of imagine like at some point in the beginning, you're wondering like, what am I doing? I'm crazy. Or maybe towards the end, it's like you're at 80 and you're like, oh man, this has been a good run. Do I need to finish? Did you feel any of those things, or were you kind of like committed to it from beginning to end without any doubts?
I was committed to it from the beginning to end, but it did take longer than I thought it would because I had to pull back the frequency I was doing it at first when I was starting to rebrand and looking for more clients because 2020 is a little hard because like I said, people weren't spending money right at first. So I had some free time on my hands. So I used that as a learning period and getting and building brand awareness.
Yeah.
So I was doing a lot at first. It then, as I started to get toward the end of 2020, clients started to pick up again. The client work started to pick up again. So I had to kind of draw it back where I was only doing maybe one or two a month versus saying like four or five.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So
then
so yeah. Well, so on that front, how did it affect business then?
it did help build brand awareness. Like I think people got to know who I was and know what I did. And, I got a lot more followers on LinkedIn that way.
Yeah.
Or just in social media in general. So it did help generate who I was, and so that was a good brand awareness building, and then it did help with business a lot.
Yeah. And did you
Building
find that
that
it was people that you were literally meeting with, or was it more like um connections of those connections?
both. It's
Yeah.
probably both of those. Yeah. And they always say you never know who you're gonna meet and who might be your client one day.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it's funny because yeah, I've had some of those kind of agenda-free relationship building meetings and lunches. And then a couple years later, like, hey, I want to work with you,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I've had those for sure. And then other times it might be a referral. It just depends. So
Yeah, that's I'm gonna see in 2020, a lot of my stuff came from referrals, and then the
mm,
same in 2021. Um, yeah, a lot of them came from referrals, or also just me to also just hammering away at it, I guess. And not hammering is not the best way. Knocking on doors. There you go. Knocking
yeah,
on
yeah.
doors.
So was it you mentioned, having to pull back on the number of lunches, which slowed down your pacing. Were there any other shifts you had to make just in terms of like taking care of the clients you had and continuing this mission and any other lessons on that front?
I just say, you know what, at the end of the day, trying to balance all of that, yeah, it's a little hard because, I have to. When I sign clients, I'm very focused on my clients when I get them. I give them my all because that's one of the things I want to make sure that they get I want to make sure they're getting the value that they expect.
Yeah.
So, but then when you tell them, hey, I can't, I'm gonna be out of pocket for a couple hours, to be honest, they don't really and you tell them, and then they find out what you've been doing. A lot of them find it like, oh wow, that's great. Never thought about that.
Yeah.
And then because there's also times I'll go speak at that through one of my lunches. I ended up meeting a professor at University of North Georgia. And I do a lot. He asked me a lot of times to come, like once a semester, to come up and talk. So that's usually like an all day affair. And people are like, okay, I'm like, I'm gonna be gone for this amount of time. If anything like comes up crazy, just give me a call and we'll talk about it. But just don't expect me to respond right away. But you can tell you, no one's It's
Yeah.
everyone understands that, you got life outside of work, right? I guess is the
Yeah.
best way to put it.
So while you're on that note, tell everyone why they should be a freelancer or a
Why
consultant.
why should they? Because you get to help people and it's a
How's
lot
it?
of fun.
Yeah. What are the perks that you like that are different than your corporate background?
I think the biggest perks is working with clients that are ready to go, right? So a lot of times when I worked in corporate, you saw a lot of red tape a lot
Hmm.
of times. And so when prospective clients start talking to you, they're either when the prospective clients, you start to figure out are they really ready? And if they are, then you know when they're ready to sign on the dotted line. Or two, they may not just be ready, but maybe they need a little coaching with some strategy or help there. So that helps build, and then that helps with the business development. Um, I think you get to meet a lot new people outside it. Like when you work in corporate, you kind of just aren't just meeting people within your company, but when you're outside of corporate, you get to meet people from all different areas and all different industries.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I find it, while I used to find the work, I did the same work in Nielson and AT&T, and it was really rewarding. I think here it's a lot more rewarding than it
Yeah.
was beforehand.
Yeah. That's cool. So you're doing these 100 meetings. What are the things you're doing that are also helping you? And so, I saw your social media posts. Hey, this is lunch number 12 or 35 or 97. Were you how did that play into it? And did you do other things like blogging or other activities?
So yeah, I do write about all those lunches. I do write a lot of I do write articles. I haven't written anything for my own site lately. I should probably get back into that, but I've been doing blogs, but I've been doing a lot more for like some publications once a quarter, or I write for some other firms
Yeah.
that I might partner with. So I do a lot of that. That's pretty much what I've been doing, or in the social media posts, right? Blast and
Yeah.
post, and I do send out I do send out a newsletter. I try to send it out once a week.
Yeah.
Sometimes, life gets in the way and it might be every 2 weeks or once a
Yeah.
month, but
Okay. Yeah, that email is important.
yeah.
With the social, how did the social posts play into all this?
The social post between my continuous improvement stuff, and I also do like a happy Monday and a Friday, and I kind of tie that back into continuous improvement. But by doing the lunches post as well, it's interesting. I don't know people. I was like, are people really reading the stuff? But then I find out people are reading it and they'll reach out to me. So as I started getting closer to 100, it's interesting. I've had so many people that wanted to be part of my lunches that I've excited to expand it into 200. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
That might take another 2 years, but or may take longer, who knows, or less. But people are really, really interested in being a part of that and learning how do you do that. In fact, I've had two people reach out to me that have landed in new positions in leadership, higher up, and they
Yeah.
asked how they want to know how what I did and what I do so that they can get to know their people that are now working for them, so
Yeah.
they can do that as well. So, like no agenda, just to get to know them better and create that relationship. Because as we start to find out, it's not always a leader telling the employee what to do. It is a very much of a two-way street, and that's
Yeah.
going into more of that. So I've had
Okay.
some people ask me about that, and I've had some other people that launched their own, so that thought it was super neat to do.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, did you find that you almost had a following of people that were like, go like almost like a
Yeah,
marathon, go Lauren,
yeah,
you can
I
do
did. Yeah, I
this.
did. I did. In fact, I think I might have surprised a few people that, like you said, when you got to the 80, it's been a good run, I'm done. I find some people thought like were surprised when I got to 100, and like we were rooting for you, but we weren't sure if you're gonna do it. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do it. In
Did
fact,
you
go ahead, go ahead.
did you inspire anyone else? Did anyone else go, I had to do this 100 lunch thing?
Yeah, I've had a few people that started their own that I've had lunches with.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing that comes to mind is sort of this idea of letting go of control. I don't, do you
Yeah.
relate to that at all in terms of this experience?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Letting go. It's almost just, it's hard. I think as individuals, a lot of us like to control what's going on, but we can't control everything that's going on in the world. And I think the 100 lunches taught me that as well. Well, the pandemic first taught me that. But then I realized, you know what? If I can only control what I can control.
Yeah.
So I think the 100 lunches helped with that. So I'm like, okay, yeah, the world might be feels like it's going crazy, but at the same time, all I can do is control how I react to it, and that's how I was reacting to it, just growing and learning.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fun. How with the when you started doing lunches in person, did it feel good? Was it weird? How did that play out?
I so at first, my first in-person lunch, I was so super excited just to go out to lunch. I think I got a little overdressed because I was like, okay, I get to go. I'm going out to lunch. This is great, and
It's the big deal.
it's a big deal. And I think you know what? In fact, 2 weeks later, I went on we had been traveling, like, we haven't really traveled, but then we started traveling a little bit more, and I think after that lunch, I went away for a long weekend, and it
Yeah.
was like, so good to get out and just see people. I'm an extrovert
Yeah.
so, getting out and seeing people, I liked it's a lot of fun to do that. So,
Yeah. Were there any particular milestones that stuck out just along the way, or any kind of moments or events or tipping points?
I would say so having the first in-person lunch was a good milestone. Getting to the 50 was a good milestone. Some of the people that gave me some really good advice. I mean, there's some really good people that gave me some really good advice, and that I've kept in touch with. Obviously, has been a good one. Knowing that there's some people that if I have questions about anything, I know I can go ask them. So I think it's the relationships. And then of course the 100 was fun. It was Ed from Kettering. He didn't know he was my 100th lunch. So
Mm. So, how did Kettering play a role in this, or how much of a role did it play?
so Kettering
And
helped.
what is
So
Kettering for those that don't know what it
okay.
is? Yeah.
Yeah, so Kettering is an executive network in the Atlanta area. I think we have so I'm being membership chair, I should know this. I think we have like 350 active members. The way it works is, once you're a member, you're always going to be a member. But if you become in if you if you don't pay your dues, you become inactive, but you still have that network of people that you know. Because but catering is if pick up the phone and someone knows I'm a catering member, they're going to pick up the phone and meet with me. Meaning that if I have a question or I've just have a question or if there's something that I need some help with or anything, so I know if that person belongs to catering, they're going to help me out
Yeah.
along the way. And that's what it is. It's a like I said, it's a very pay it forward organization. We're very like, in order to become a member, you have to be sponsored. We do have some criteria that we do like to have people meet. But so the first time, my first experience, um, I remember walking in and I remember coming home telling my husband, like, everyone is so nice. I'm like, that's a little different. I wasn't used to that. And that's what it is. Everyone's really, really nice. And in fact, I've been out and seen people and we're like, "Oh, hey, how are you doing?" In fact, probably about a year and a half ago, my dad was up here visiting from Florida, and we happened to be at a lake. A lake it's called Lake Lanier. It's one of the lakes here, and we're going to a restaurant on the water, and standing in front of me was at the time was the president of Kettering. I got to introduce him to all of my family, my family and stuff. So I was like, "Oh, look, see how nice they are."
That's cool. What so when you think about community building, like how much of a role did this play in cultivating your community, growing it? How do you feel about community differently than you did before?
Yeah, so building a community. So I think they used to always say was it your tribe, right? People always talk about their tribes. And so that kind of equates into community in my mind. So it wasn't just like so I was able to build a community of people that I know that I have a pool of people now that if I do have questions or if I need some advice or something, I know I could go to them. Because I feel like I have like 100 new friends.
Yeah.
And I do try to keep in touch with people as much as possible. It is very hard to keep in touch with a lot
Yeah.
of people. Um, but it's been yeah, having that community is a huge thing. I always think I know there's people on LinkedIn that have probably like 10,000 followers. I think I'm up to like 4,500, which
Yeah.
I think is a really good number. And I'm like, and I've and that's one thing I'm seeing people with these vast number of people. I'm like, are they really connected with them? I mean, okay, yes, there's some out there that are just they're big influencers, and I know they're always gonna have a big following, but I feel like community is a big thing. And so if you get to know your people on a more personal level, it's a little bit different than just having
Yeah.
thousands of people you really don't know.
Yeah. So like when you think about trends, like whether they're technology or business, like did you notice any shifts through your 100 lunches that were noticeable in terms of just the change in the world and how technology and business affect it?
So that's, it's kind of plays into what I do and what I help clients with, right? So with continuous improvement, so business process improvement, and then also adding technology into that. I think it's interesting. I've met with people that were like that were scared of technology, and I think my biggest thing that I always try to tell people is like, don't be afraid of it. It's just here to help us. It's not going to be a Terminator take over the world.
Not, yeah. Well, it's if we use it as a vehicle for some purpose, it
Yeah,
can be a good. And I think
yeah.
we can get stuck in the idea that it becomes about the technology, and that's where we get ourselves in trouble.
Yeah, and what's interesting though is some of the people that I've met that are involved in technology, under believe it or not, they understand that like it's a vehicle to make people's lives easier. And I think as the world has changed, I think a lot of people want to find ways where they're not at work all the time. Like so that's what I love helping businesses help change and help
Yeah,
create an environment that's with problem solvers but also taking away the mundane tasks, right? So I think business leaders are seeing that they need to talk to their employees more and that they have to be a bit more transparent and seeing to take that technology is okay now. And I think a lot of people got more comfortable with virtual meetings because it was a way of that's the only way we could do business for a while. We weren't allowed to go visit in person. In fact, I mean, wasn't it just this year that a lot of the COVID restrictions are finally being dropped within the past 3 to 6 months? So people understand that it's okay to meet virtually. And then once, maybe it's that the best way to do things is to do things virtually for a while and then meet in person every once in a while. You don't have to meet in person all the time. So, um, even though I still think some of the bigger corporations are going back into that mode of we need to have everybody in the office, and they see that people don't want that. They
mm,
want to have the ability to choose what's right for their life, which is a big thing. I think work life balance has become a big thing for people. And
yeah,
so I'm gonna see. It's gonna be interesting to see how this all plays out, especially with this financial stuff that's going on in the world right now too.
yeah, yeah. It's a wild ride. We're on the boat in the middle of an ocean with the stormy weather.
Yeah, we are. We are. It's gonna be interesting to see how people embrace it. In fact, um, just I'm gonna say just the organizations here in Atlanta, just knowing who the big corporations are. Some of them are we're trying to bring people back in the office, and then they realize they can't do that because nobody wants to go sit in an office
Yeah,
for 5 days a week. It's not something we can
yeah.
do.
And I know people that moved, right?
Yeah,
They couldn't go back even if they were forced to. They'd
yeah.
rather quit than move back, you know?
Oh yeah, I know a lot of people like that too. I know a lot of people that have done that or said, "Hey, uh, no, we're not. I'm not moving from here. This is where my family is. This is my kids are like they're realizing, kids are more important than the job too. So if their kids are, say, a sophomore in high school, there's no reason to move them. Let them finish that out, and that's having a remote being able to be remote and virtual is a good thing. That's why I said I think we might start to see we're still seeing some struggles in the balance of that, but I think it's going to come better as things go on, especially with if there's a recession. People are like, you know what? Maybe we don't need to have everyone in person all the time.
Yeah, there's benefits. Um, so what about like your ideal customer? Like who's the type of businesses that you like and work best with?
I usually I work from anywhere. So my smallest customer had 50 people, we think 50 people. I worked with a small business around like that, around the small medium about that size to Fortune 500s.
Yeah.
So I work with what I do. It just depends on what they're looking for. A lot of times it's just going in and figure out where the inefficiencies are in the process. And usually sometimes we just start very, very small. Sometimes I come in and they know they have this really big problem. I got to help them with that. So it's a broad of things of where I work. The
What are
only
what are
pla
some of the what are some of the pain points or problems that tend to stick out?
A lot of the big it depends on a lot of things. So I've done some work in in the accounting areas or finance areas of companies, and this is industry agnostic, but where they've had it takes there's a lot of manual task, right, along collecting payments.
Hmm.
Um and that also kind of falls into payroll as well, like a lot of exceptions, a lot of manual exceptions. But going in and saying, okay, do you really need to be doing that check all the time, or is that really efficient way of doing things? So finding the best practices and applying that in efficiencies.
Mm,
um but it's not me telling them what to do, it's more of me doing assessment, figuring out like seriously something simple as process mapping. Sometimes I'm just sitting there to see how long it takes and just
yeah.
having a conversation with people to know what they do on what they do, and then putting the pieces of the puzzle together so they understand what that looks like, and then also understanding what their customers are experiencing. And a
Mm,
customer is internal and external, and then bringing everybody together and figuring out to get and helping them understand how to learn and how to problem solve.
mm,
So like I said, it's just me guiding them through this whole process and helping them, and maybe asking the right questions along the way and listening, and then understanding what the root causes are. Sometimes we look at data for that, like doing some statistical analysis, data analysis, and then having them pinpoint how do they solve that. The best solutions come from the people doing the work themselves. And
yeah.
I always tell my clients, because I always usually have the first conversation is with the leaders,
Yeah.
and I just say, they're gonna have the best solutions. I guess I might have some best practices that I could apply, but I want them to see what they have first. And I'm gonna tell you, a lot of times those best practices is people already know what to do.
Mm,
They just didn't feel empowered enough to maybe say something.
mm.
So when I
So
do
you're
these work,
helping them to voice
yeah,
their opinion, to disagree when it's appropriate.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's really just about, and it's funny, it's a lot of times it just takes getting people together and start talking.
Hmm.
And once getting into one room, or it could be in person, it can be into a virtual room, whatever. It's a lot of times it's just breaking down those silos and getting just people to talk.
Mm.
And to be
Well, that
honest, go ahead.
well, I was gonna say that tells me that there's not enough listening happening.
You're right. They're right. It is communication is a huge thing. And it happens across. It's not just at the Fortune 500 level. It is at this lower levels as well. Um, because people are protective about their jobs. They want to make sure that at the end of the day, most people want to provide value into what they do. They because you know what, you spend what 8 hours a day working. At least it depends on what you do, but that's where you spend a good chunk of your day is
Yeah.
working. And usually the biggest selling point for me is I'm just coming in here as a third person to help you, but at the end of the day, I want to make your life easier, right? I want to help you solve these problems and figure out the best way for you to do the work so so you don't have to work overtime. So you can
Yeah.
go back, have that life work balance so you can spend more time with your family. That's
Yeah.
usually a huge thing especially when it comes to change management. I think is a huge buy. You get buy-in that way, a lot easier.
Yeah. So you're helping these clients with automation and streamlining processes. How do you contrast that with with your relationship building and community building that you've done? Like, how does automation and streamlining tie into or create problems and when it comes to relationships?
Um, you know what? I don't think it creates problems. I think it actually helps it.
Yeah,
And that's what, yeah. So especially when people see that they're there to help. So the relationship building, I'm able to take what I've learned from my lunches, and I was able to apply it with my clients, right? Just
yeah,
like listening. And what's funny is a lot of times when I go into like just listening, trying to do the assessment, like the current state assessments to see what the problems where to figure out where the problems are and listen to people before I bring them all together in a group. I like to meet with them all individually or in smaller groups. A lot of times I just sit there and listen. I'm like, I'm just here to learn what you do on a daily basis. What is your process? I don't want because a lot of times uh I don't want to look at old process maps. I like to know what they're doing today because, to be honest, what's might have been mapped out even just 3 months ago is not usually relevant today.
yeah, yeah. It's
Or yeah, go ahead. I say, or they don't share what exactly they're doing because they were
mm,
scared.
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you say all that because just recently Elon Musk finally bought Twitter,
Yeah,
and I was thinking about that. I thought, you know, if he was smart, he would probably take several months just listening before he changed anything. And
yeah,
we'll see if he does that. I think that's a big part of it is just listening, understanding before before changing, right?
yeah, yeah. I've done that too. I've had people that I've known in my network that have maybe moved or transitioned into a new company. And a lot of times they'll come and start talking to me, and I said, and I usually my advice to them is let's talk again within like in 90 to 180 days.
Mm,
I can come in and help you a little bit with strategy. I said, but for me to try and go make changes without you really know what's going on. So sometimes they will bring me in just to learn what's going on, not
yeah,
make changes, and then the changes will come probably 6 months later. But
yeah,
a lot of times it's me just going in and just learning to help them learn so that they have a true assessment of what's going on. But even then, that's a little hard, especially if they just started because, they're like, oh wait, who's this person coming in?
yeah,
So that's why I usually say let's wait, bring me in about 90 days in, and then that way you can develop your relationships with your people a little bit better.
yeah, yeah. So looking back at these 100 lunches, anything else you'd want to lessons learned? Anything you'd want to highlight that we haven't already talked about?
Uh, Biggest lesson learned is just getting out there and meeting people and just becoming comfortable with it. And I've always told people this, especially people I mentor, don't just stick to your industry or stick to your company. Just be open to meeting people from all over. It's especially because you never know, right? In this day and age, what you might be doing in one industry can actually be done in a different industry. And I would say just have those connections and keep up with those connections. Those are the
Yeah,
biggest things that I've learned.
cool. So on that front, like how would you say what is the difference between creating connections and maintaining them? Like what does that look like practically?
Oh,
The difference.
maintaining. Uh, so creating connections is just going out and meeting people, but then a lot of times, well, in the old days, right, we used to get those business cards. I think now a lot of people could just like do it right. They'll do it virtually and do it I LinkedIn. And even though I still get business cards now, but it's actually the first step into creating that connection and maintaining it is sending a note on, hi, nice to meet you. We met at such and such event, or I met you through this person, and maybe highlighting something that I do. And then keeping up with those people, right? Maybe once a quarter, or it could even be once every 6 months. It depends on how
Yeah.
busy you are, right? Just dropping a note, or if you follow them on LinkedIn, just, commenting on stuff, or if you see like, LinkedIn's really good about letting you know about people's birthdays. Just things like that, right? Just create and just always reaching out in those ways. Or if you saw something like, I've done this before, especially with other people that are in consulting that are in a different area of consulting. Like I've had some people that do financial consulting or fractional CFOs. I've come across things where I know people need help, and I'm like, I would connect them. I try to keep those people in mind. Like, hey,
Yeah.
this is something that might be of interest to you. Go take a look. Or
Yeah.
if I read an article or a book or something.
Yeah. That's cool. Anything else?
Um, that's pretty much about it. Yeah, I think it's just being open to connect with people, and just always being open. Don't be so closed minded. Just be open minded.
Yeah. How can people connect with you? Where are you located on the social medias,
Uh,
websites, internet?
yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram, but it just look for Lauren Hisey or Lauren Hisey Consulting. You can go to my website. The best way to get to my website, I do have just go to laurenhisey.com, and
You got links.
that'll
Yeah.
links over to my other website.
Cool. And then if they want to sign up to your newsletter, I assume that's on there as well.
Yeah, the best way to sign up for you know what? I need to automate this. We talk about automation and technology. I need to automate that. It's on my to-do list. But if they want to get on my newsletter, just they drop me, connect with me on my website. There's a contact us there that sends me an email, or they can connect with me, send me direct message on LinkedIn or Instagram.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Lauren, for sharing your life with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me on again, Jason. I'm so excited to see you reach 100. So